Hello, welcome to episode 151 of True Crime Lounge. My name is Breezy, and we are sitting comfortably on my couch. And I'm going to be honest with you guys, I'm on my couch. I don't care what I look like. This is a podcast for crying out loud. I can look like complete crap and get away with it. Right? Right. So, today, we have a rare occasion where I have the place all to myself so I get to freely record in the living room. That's amazing, right? Um, excuse the hair. I have laundry going in the dryer. I have to eventually get a shower, but because I'm trying to wait till later on tonight because I have to work tomorrow. And let's be honest, do I really want to get one right now? I just want to lay in bed all day, but that's not healthy. Tempting, but not healthy. But with that being said, why don't I dive into today's episode? Today, we're going to be talking about the fallen of the Western, a Mr. Thomas Ince. And who was this Mr. Thomas Ince? Why are we talking about him? Why is he falling in the true crime category? Well, Thomas Ince was a silent film and filmmaker who was aboard a yacht when the yacht William Randolph Hearst in November 1924 when he was reportedly fell ill. Now, he was brought ashore and he died 4 days later, officially of a heart attack, but rumors began circulating that Ince did not die from health problems. But um he died um but that Hearst accidentally shot Ince in the head. And the story goes that Hearst found his mistress, Marion Davies, in a compromising position with Charlie Chaplin, who was also on the boat, and according to his theory, Ince ran down um, when he heard Davies screaming and accidentally shot Hearst. Was shot by Hearst. Now, that's just a story, right? Could it be true? Could it not be true? We will we'll figure it out, right? Or we may not. Who knows, right? This is old Hollywood crime, so um Thomas Harper Ince was an American silent film era filmmaker and proprietor, and he was known for the father of the Western, and he was responsible for working over 800 films, and he revolutionized the motion picture industry by creating the first Hollywood studio facility that invented movie production and introducing the assembly line system of filmmaking. Now, he was the first mogul to build his own studio, which was dubbed Inceville in Palisades Highlands. Now, Ince was also instrumental in developing the role of the producer in motion picture. Three of his films, The Italian, for which he wrote as a screenplay, Hell's Hinges, and Civilization, which he directed, and was selected for preservation by the National Film Registry. Now, he later entered into a partnership with D.W. Griffith and Max Sennett um, from the Triangle Motion Picture Company, whose studios are the present day site of Sony Studios. He would then build a mount. He would then build about a mile from the Triangle, which is now the site of Culver Studio. Now, is it ultimate untimely death at the height of his career, and after he became severely ill aboard the private yacht of William Randolph Hearst, has caused many speculations, although the official cause of death was a heart failure. Um, But he was born November 16th, 1880 in Newport, Rhode Island. He was the middle of three sons and a daughter raised by English immigrants John E. and Emma Hence. He was born in Wigan, Lancashire in 1841, and he was the youngest of nine who enlisted um, in the British Navy and called as a powder monkey. He later disembarked to San Francisco and found work as a reporter and coal miner in around 1887. When Hens was about seven, his family moved to Manhattan to pursue theater work. Hens's father worked as both an actor and musical agent, and his mom, um, Hens's his mom, his sister, and brothers, John and Ralph, all worked as actors. So Ince made his Broadway debut at 15 in a small role in a revival of the 1893 play Shore Acres by James A. Horn, and he appeared within several stock companies as a child and was later an office boy at a theatrical manager Daniel Frohman. He later formed an unsuccessful company known as Thomas H. Ince and His Comedians in Atlantic Highlands, New Jersey. In 1907, Ince would meet actress Eleanor Corshaw, and they would marry October 19th of that year. They would have three children. Now, his directing career um, would begin in 1910, though a chance encounter in New York City with an employee from old acting troupe. Now, William S. Hart has found the first film work as an actor as for the Biograph Company, directed by the future president partner D.W. Griffith. And Griffith was impressed enough to hire Hens in production coordinator of the Biograph. And this will lead to him coordinating productions of Carl Lemoney's independent um, motion pictures company. And that same year, a director at the IMP was unable to complete work on a small feature film. So, in a moment of bravado, Hens would suggest that Laemmle hire him as a full-time director to complete his film. Now, he was so impressed with the young man that Laemmle sent him to Cuba to make one-reel shorts with his new stars, Mary Pickford and Owen Moore. Out of the reach of Thomas Edison's motion picture patent companies, the trust was attempting to crush all independent productions and companies and corner on the film productions. Now, his output was small, although he tackled many different subjects and he was strongly drawn to Western and American Civil War dramas. Now, there was a clash between the trust and the independent films that became exaggerated, so Ince moved to California to escape these pressures, and he helped and achieved the effects to accomplish the minimal facility like Griffith, um, which he believed could only be accomplished in Hollywood. After only a year with IMP, he quit, and in September 1911, he walked into the offices of actors financier Charles O. Bowman, and who co-owned a New York motion picture with an actor-writer Adam Kissel Jr., and hence found the NYMPC, which had recently established a West Coast studio named Bison Studios in 1719 Alessandra in Edendale to make westerns that he wanted to direct those motion pictures. Now, to offer it, uh, the offer came as a distinct shock, but he would keep cool, and he would try to convey the impression that he was ready to raise the aunt a trifle if he wanted to. Now, that also worked because he was signed with a contract with them for 3 months, $150 a week, and very soon, with Ince, his cameraman and property man, they were in leading woman, they were heading Cal westward. Now, together with his young wife and small entourage, he would move to the Bison Studios to begin work immediately. He was shocked, however, to discover that the studio was nothing more than attractive land, only one four-room bungalow in a barn. So let's talk about Hinsville now. Um, Hang on one second, guys. All right. Sorry about that. I had to check on something real quick, but um, Hinsville, um, his explorations would eventually leave the narrow confines of Edendale and find a location that was of greater scope and variety. He settled upon a 460-acre tract of land called Bison Ranch, located at Sunset Boulevard in the Pacific Coast Highland at the Santa Monica Mountains, which was rented by the day. Now, by 1912, he had earned enough money to purchase the ranch, and he was granted permission by the MYMP to lease another 18,000 acres in the Palisades Highlands, stretching about 7.5 miles up the Santa Ynez Canyon between Santa Monica and Malibu, where Universal Studios was eventually established, which was owned by the Miller Bros of Ponca City, Oklahoma, and it was hence there that he built the first movie studio. Now, this, the Bison Ranch Studio, which was in the Miller Studios Inceville, was the first of its kind that is silence film stages, production offices, printing labs, a commissionary large enough to serve launch to hundreds of workers, dressing rooms, prop houses, elaborate sets, and other necessities, all in one location. So, um, while the sites were under construction, Hess also leased the 101 Ranch and Wild West show from the Miller brothers, bringing up the whole troops from Oklahoma to California via train. Now, the show consisted of 300 cowboys and cowgirls and 600 horses, cattle, and other livestock in a Sioux tribe. They were then renamed the Bison 101 Ranch Company and specialized in making westerns released under the name World Famous Features. So, when construction was completed, the streets were lined up with many types of structurals, from humble cottages to mansions, mimicking the style and architecture of different countries. Extensive outdoor and western sets were built and used at the site for several years. Now, according to yeah, Catherine LaHue, um, that's just fun to say, LaHue. But okay, anyway, in her book Pacific Palisades, where the mountain meets the star, she will go on to say that Hess invested 35,000 building stages and sets, a bit of Switzerland, a Puritan settlement, a Japanese village, beyond the breakers of an ancient brigantine where it weighed anchored, cut last, and then swarming over the ships, with wild ashore of the farmers. Now, twirling the lassos in pursuit of errant cattle, the main herds were kept in the hills, where ants also raised feed and garnered produce. Supplies of every sort was needed to the house, and a veritable army of actors and directors and subordinates. Now, while the cowboys, Native Americans, assorted workmen lived in Inceville, the main actors came to LA, and the other communities as well, taking the red trolley cars to the long wharf of the Tentacle Canyon, where buckboards conveyed them to the set. Now, S lived in a place overlooking vast studios, later in a location on Marquez Knolls. Here is Here he functioned in the central authority to over over multiple production units, changing the films that was made and organizing production methods to discipline the system of filmmaking. Now, Inceville became a prototype for Hollywood film studios of the future. Now, with a studio head, producers, directors, and production managers, production staff, and writers all working together under one organization and under the supervision of General Manager Fred J. Belshaffer. Now, before this, the director and the cameraman were controlled by the production of the picture, but Ince put the producer in charge of the film from inception to the final product. He defied the producer's role both as a creative industrial sense, but he also was one of the first to have separated screenwriter, director, and editor. And by 1913, the concept of production manager has been created with the aid of George Stout, the accountant from NYMP, where he reorganized how films were outputted to bring discipline and process. After this adjustment, the studio's weekly output increased from one to two, and later two real pictures per week, and it released under the same names such as KB, Domino, Bronco, and these were written, produced, and cut and assembled um, and made at time. Now, he also decentralized the process of movie production to meet the increase in demand of theater that was drawing the assembly line there. Now, with the model it developed between 1913 and 1918, he gradually exercised even more control over film production in the process of Director General. In 1913, he also made this loose strand is going to drive me crazy. Screw it, we're going to go with it. Uh, we'll fix it in a minute. But he would gradually even have more control over the production as a director general. In 1913, he made over 152 reeler movies, mostly westerns, therefore anchoring the popularity for the genre for decades. And while many of his films were praised in Europe, many American critics did not share the highly opinion. One picture was the Battle of Gettysburg, which was 5 reels long. The picture helped bring into vogue the idea of a feature-length film, and another important movie from for Ince was The Italian, which depicted immigrant life in Manhattan. And two of the most successful films were among the first. War on the Plains, Cluster's Custer's Last Fight, which featured many Native Americans who had actually been in the battle. So even though he was the first producer director and directed most of his early productions, by 1913 he eventually ceased full directing to concentrate on producing, transferring the responsibility to such proteges like Francis Ford, and his brother John Ford, Jack Conway, William Desmond Taylor, Reginald Barker, Fred Nebo, Henry King, and Frank Borzage. Now you can actually go back and watch the William Desmond Taylor case I did for him, if you would like. I have actually done one for him. Now, the story was a predominant aspect of features in films such as The Italian, um, The Gangsters and the Girl, the Clodhopper, the excellent examples of dramatic features and resulted from his masterful editing. Now, film preservationist David Shepard said that Ince was the American said said this American film heritage that he did everything. He was so efficient. Now, Hiss also discovered many talents, like including an old friend, William S. Hart, whom made some best early westerns beginning in 1914, and later a rift would develop between the two, sharing the profits. Now, on January 16, 1916, a few days after opening for his first Culver studio, a fire broke out at Inceville, and the first eventually destroyed all the buildings. 8 people were injured, including Ince, and the damage was estimated at $250,000. Now, the cause was probably a spark that ignited the flammable nitrate film. And what was that? Yeah, that stock had been discarded as part of an editing process, and there have been earlier Inceville fires in 1915 that destroyed a number of sets. So Ince later gave up on the studio and sold it to Hart, and he which he named it Hartville. 3 years later, Hart sold it to Robertson Cole Pictures Production, which continued filming until 1923. And LaHue wrote that it was virtually a ghost town, and the last remnants of Inceville were born on July 4th, 1922, leaving only a weather-worn old church which stood sentimental of the charred ruins. Um, that is it for part one. Join me next time as we talk about the second part of this two-part series.